past weekend has been one of not the best news, to say the least. We have a former president who's been diagnosed with cancer. We also had a pretty disastrous shipwreckage into the Brooklyn Bridge. And we have a couple updates on some stories that I would like to share with you guys. Without any further ado, I'm your host, Sal Assante. This is the We The Patriots Podcast. Let's get right into it. So, hope you all had a nice week. It's unfortunate that a lot of crappy news has kind of been just dropped on us like a hammer the last couple of days. I'll be honest, I didn't really know where I was going to go with the show this week. I think I was going to keep it light and not really too intensive. Now I got a whole bunch of stories that I feel like I got to comment on. I don't really see us being with the Patriots. I don't really see us as being one that's spreading all the news, but I do like to talk about things that are going on, things that are impactful. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if you can't tell by my attitude and my cadence so far, I'm a little taken aback by the news. I wish I had some better things to share with you, but we're gonna get right into it today. So what I want to start with today is, first of all, the thoughts and prayers is kind of like a seen today as kind of like a weak message, but I think it's very important to send out our prayers for former President Biden. Joe Biden has been diagnosed with a pretty aggressive form, as I understand it, of prostate cancer. Now, according to some outlets, it has spread pretty severely throughout his body, even possibly affecting his bones. To other outlets, it seems to be pretty concentrated in the prostate. All in all, anecdotally, people that have been somewhat close to me or people in my community that have been diagnosed with this form of cancer, it is an aggressive and very bleak outlook, to say the least, this form of cancer. And I can only wish the former president the best. I hope that he is able to recover, or at least live out a very good rest of his life, if it is a short amount of time, which it very well may be. Now, what I do want to say in conjunction with me saying that is, number one, that I'm absolutely not wishing him a short form of life. I do not think that he is deserving of this. It's very sad that, and I think this is kind of the way of the times right now. We have a pretty vulgar online experience at this point, and not too many things are, not that speech should be curtailed, but I think that we should also be able to self-censor a little bit. You should be able to self-censor quite a bit. There's a lot of things that you may be feeling, you may be thinking, and you just don't say it. I don't know how many of you have heard the phrase. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard the phrase, but if you got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. I think that has to do a lot, too, with our online way of speaking about each other, to each other, including everybody in the conversation, demeaning people, putting them down, wishing death. Every day you log into Twitter, you're seeing some form or another of a call for assassination on President Trump, whether it's a little bit of a undertone or whether it's pretty overt. You see it every day, and it's kind of sickening. Not to equate, and not to bring Trump into something that's with Biden, but it just kind of comes to mind as I want to speak about this. That I have seen a lot of people in regards to what's been going on with former President Biden and wishing him the worst, saying that he deserves worse than what he has. And I'm sorry, but you can't wish this on anybody. Doesn't matter if they're your worst enemy, if they're a sick person, wishing cancer on them is, well, I think it really makes you the lesser person in any conversation. It's a sad diagnosis. It's sad to see someone go through something so grueling. It doesn't matter if former president, they could be your neighbor, it could be someone that was homeless and you just happen to bump into on the streets of New York City. Either way, you shouldn't be wishing any of these people diagnosis of cancer such as this. And it's saddening to me. I've had a couple of my own grandparents actually diagnosed and did end up passing away from cancer. And it's just not a good feeling. The whole Biden family is, I'm sure, feeling pretty taken aback by this diagnosis. And again, wish him the best. I can't imagine that this is a good diagnosis. At his age, being over the age of 80, survivor rates of prostate cancer are very, very small at best. Just send out our prayers. I think we could do that as a community. I think that would be very, it'd be very good for us as a culture, as a community, and more broadly speaking, as a nation, to wish him the best in health. Whether that is, again, a speedy recovery if possible, or a good end to his days and not suffering. Again, this form of cancer is not known to be light. The treatment is not a an easy one either to go through or to watch a family member or community member, anybody that you're close to watch them go through it. So this is going to be a tough time and a trying time. We just wish the best for President Biden. Now, I do want to bring up something that was brought to my attention as I was reading a little bit about this cancer diagnosis for Biden, and that is that this is not his first go-around with cancer. Now, this may have been an oversight by myself. It may have been underreported. It may have been a combination of those two things, but I'm going to go with the fact that I was probably not paying all that much attention back in 2023 when it was discussed for the first time. But he actually did have a cancerous skin lesion that was removed in 2023 while he was in office. Now, could it have been that we as a country or we as the media didn't want to put out a narrative that our president was in ill health? It's very possible. That being said, this is not former President Biden's first go around with cancer, and we will see. We will see. We wish him the best. Unfortunately, I can't imagine that this is going to end very well. It already isn't ending well if you're ending up with this kind of a diagnosis, but I'm sorry to be so stuck on this, but I'm a little taken aback that this has come out this week. It's pretty sad news to receive. Now, I do want to stay on Biden here for a moment because I think something else pretty important came out over the past week that I did want to talk about regardless of the news that dropped this weekend. And that is that there's a lot of talk going around now as Jake Tapper is about to release a book, or possibly already released a book, I'm not exactly sure which, that is detailing the cognitive decline of President Biden while he was in office. Now, it's interesting. Jake Tapper, well known to be a left of center media figure. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but there was a lot of thought that, especially on the conservative side of things, or maybe even independent side of things, that there was a lot of cover up going into, covering up Joe Biden's mental status as he was performing the presidential duties. And I think that the release of this book actually goes to prove the opposite. The opposite, that I should say, that Jake Tapper and those like Jake may be thinking that it proves. As you'll see, as the history books get to be written, I can almost guarantee you that many people are going to point to this book by Jake Tapper as an example of people on the left willing to confront the fact that Biden was cognitively in decline. Now, that being said, the whole point that there was a cover-up was the fact that nobody was talking about this while he was in office. And it is very interesting to me that it didn't even take, let's do the math here, it didn't really even take Biden to be out of office 5 months for them to start dropping, bombshell reports that he was having disagreements or getting found out by people in his staff, getting a book dropped now, mentioning that he's, relatively speaking, not cognitively well. It's very interesting. You look back and you think about how possibly this could have been treated if it was President Trump and if he was found to be cognitively in decline in the same way that most people kind of recognize that Joe Biden was. If you looked back over time and kind of just look at the progression of the way that Joe Biden was talking to the public, go back to the days of him being a senator, even when he was running as Barack Obama's running mate in 2008 and then again in 2012. You don't, in my opinion, you don't necessarily see someone who is really a go-getter and is going to crush you politically, but you did see someone who was full of vigor. You did see someone who could form long and decent thoughts, at least display of thought patterns, and be able to put words and sentences together to formulate answers to tough questions, to be able to combat narratives. And as you got to see President Biden go throughout his presidency, and especially into the later years, the more he was confronted with a question that might not have been on the docket, might not have been handed to him beforehand, the more you saw the stutters, the inability to create and formulate a good thought, a well put together string of sentences, a lot of run-ons. You guys remember anytime that he would stand up on a podium, you were just waiting for the moment of right? Stuttering massively. And not to say there's anything wrong with the stutter, but when you are talking about someone who's holding as high of an office as President of the United States, being able to speak intelligently and fluently and for all to understand is a very important aspect. And again, I think it's pretty obvious. You look back, not again Not to point out that Joe Biden was ever a real go-getter politically wise. He did hang around for quite a while, but you did see a significant decrease in his ability to handle the moment and be able to answer, generally speaking, pretty simple questions to answer. It may not be a question that you want to answer, but questions that, relatively speaking, should be expected to have to answer. Now, before I go any further, I just want to apologize. My allergies have kicked in like crazy over the past couple of days. I don't know. My eyes are starting to bug out. My nose, I feel like I can't even breathe. I was pretty unintelligently, I will say, hoping for the best, as it seemed that with this year being the year that I've stopped pretty much all use, just about all use of marijuana, I was thinking that my allergies weren't coming back. They've been hitting me like a truck for the past, say, 5 to 7 years. Allergies have been really kicking my butt, and no, they're back. It was naive of me to think that quitting weed would have helped with this, because I'm getting hit like a truck right now. So for all you people out in New Jersey, New York, all this area that might be feeling the allergies, well, I'm right there with you, and I apologize for the nasally sound, possibly my voice. I apologize for the scratching of the eyes. I can't really help it. I apologize. So, getting further into it, I do want to talk about this story that came out of New York City the other day. It was actually yesterday as I'm recording this. Pretty crazy story. So, it was a Mexican vessel. Was traveling. I can't really get a good read on what kind of vessel this was, whether it was like some sort of cruise ship, some sort of entertainment vessel. It had to be something along the sorts. This vessel, and I'm not going to put the video up here on YouTube. I don't know if it would get flagged, but probably it's showing death. It's pretty gruesome. You can go find it probably anywhere on X now. You can probably go find a video of this boat ramming into the Brooklyn Bridge, and it is just a surreal video. To see something as crazy as that, it's really unexpected. And the reason that it became deadly is that you had multiple crew members of this vessel standing, being a part of the masts, the upheld sails of this vessel, and all up along these masts. And the mast snapped, not quite in half, but a good portion of the mast snapping and breaking off of the bottom of the bridge. It's just a crazy video to see. The fact that it's real is really kind of blowing my mind even still to this moment. Getting sent this video earlier this morning was not something I was really expecting, to tell you the truth. And yeah, it's really absolutely blowing my mind that this is even a possibility. So in talking about this, I'm not going to get into a ton of the details, because again, I think more details need to come out. Story is a pretty interesting one. It seemed like the boat was on its way out of the harbor, actually heading out of New York, and for some reason or another went the wrong direction, went headlong into the bottom of the bridge again. And it is just absolutely fascinating to me that, you know, it's to my understanding that you need quite a bit of certification in order to operate a vessel, especially of that size. You need a crew that's on your side in terms of navigation, and to watch as people are quite literally at the level, standing at the level of this bridge on these masts of this ship, and there's no communication, seemingly nobody looking to stop this. I mean, it cracks into the first set of masts, it cracks into the second, cracks into the third, might have been a fourth, it cracked right on through it. Now, could you have stopped the vessel at that point? I'm guessing probably not. Could you have slowed it down? Very possibly, or at least tried to form an evacuation route for the people that were stuck up top there. It's a very scary situation, and it reminds me a lot of what happened in Baltimore. I believe it was either last year or the year before, where we had quite a massive vessel ram into the bridge down in Baltimore. And how these accidents are even possibly occurring, there's really, I mean, to my knowledge, there's no possible way of linking this to a leadership issue. Like, you bring back that Baltimore bridge incident, there was no way to tie it to the Biden administration or Biden himself. There's no way to tie this to Trump or anybody himself. It's actually a Mexican vessel, as I mentioned. I am just curious as to how it's even possible to have these types of people that were allowed to orchestrate this in any way, shape, or form. It seems like there was definitely some ineptitude, some lack of ability in terms of maneuvering ship, and the crew has got to be responsible to a significant degree, and the captain of the ship, I've got to imagine, is fully responsible. How it's possible, again, to go the wrong direction, to head into overhanging bridges, just absurd to me. How it's even conceivably possible. how this happened. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry for repeating myself, but I'm a little bit blown away. So as the story goes, there's 2 people dead. There's over 20 people that are critically injured. It is just mind-boggling. It is really, really unbelievable that this happened. But again, I think we need to send our prayers out to the people that were injured in this. Hopefully that the people that were responsible for this, as it's very different than something like what's going on with Joe Biden. This is something where somebody is responsible. And in every way, shape, and form, I hope that the person that's responsible meets the justice that they deserve for being held liable for killing 2 people and injuring quite a few more. That's another very sad story, and to be honest, a very sad weekend of news that came out. Now, to move on from that, I don't want to linger on that. That story's pretty brutal. The first 2 stories are pretty brutal. I got an update to a story that I did last week, actually. Now, last week I talked a lot about President Trump and his stance towards the Middle East changing quite a bit. Now, an update to that. Number 1, Trump is planning on accepting I believe it was valuated at around a $400 million jet from the Saudis, I believe. Could have been from Qatar. Believe it's from the Saudis, or at least it's funneling through Saudi Arabia. This is a really fascinating story to me. It's very interesting. Now, what does it mean? According to Trump, he wants to utilize it as the new Air Force One, as he was quoted. Paraphrase here, don't have the exact words, but in his words, Air Force One is something like a 40-year-old aircraft, and updating the aircraft would be a benefit. And taking on a free gift from an empire like Saudi Arabia, to him, it's a very good thing. As I'm looking at it as a citizen, I'm not really sure exactly how to feel about it. I'm not going to lie. I don't really like the idea, just to tell you the honest truth and how I feel about it. I don't really like the idea. And it's not because I don't want to accept a gift. I think that it's, relatively speaking, if someone wants to give a diplomatic gift, I think that that is on them. You accept the gift and say thank you. But when you're talking about something that might be used, as Trump is saying, as the possible next Air Force One, you need to vet that machinery very, very heavily. There could be possible booby traps. There could be any number of things wrong with it. It could be bugged. It could be so many things, especially if you hear stories coming out of the former Soviet Union and the amount of ways that they were able to get listening devices into spaces that did not have an ability to be found by bug sweepers because they weren't running off of any particular form of power. That scares me. The fact that our president may be accepting and utilizing such an important mode of transport for the president of the United States and taking it from someone who is not really necessarily an ally of ours. It's a little uneasy. It's a little uneasy, to say the least, in my mind. I'm not one of those that, again, is like, we should be building it ourselves. We should be turning it down because we can build it ourselves. I'm not necessarily saying that's the reason, although I do think that the American might can put together a better ship for our president. I do think that's possible. I'm more of the opinion that this seems unsafe. It seems like there could be too many issues, too many conflicts of interest, too many things going on that are just giving me pause. That, not that I have any aspirations at any point in my life to become the president of the United States, but if I was confronted with this issue, I would say thanks, but no thanks. I'll gladly take the investment money that you all are proposing to give in. Now, that's another update to the situation. I believe that Saudi Arabia has committed to something like a $600 billion investment into the American economy. That is massive, and being able to negotiate from that standpoint is a very big deal when you're talking about the successes of the Trump administration. So good on him for that. Good on him for being able to negotiate different ways to invigorate our economy. Up to him. That's fantastic. The plain thing is just holding me up a little bit. It's a little bit of an oddity. It kind of came out of nowhere. Now, talking about another update out of the Middle East, this one was, I would say it's actually probably a good update, but I got to caveat that. So as it turns out, President Trump is in fact in communication with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Why do I think that might be a good thing? Well, as I stated in last week's show, there had been multiple reports out on the White House and how they were handling their attitude towards Israel, and there were many mentions of the fact that President Trump has now stopped talking to Bibi Netanyahu, that he got frustrated, this, that, Turns out that not necessarily that was false, but that has changed. President Trump is now talking to the Prime Minister of Israel. Now, why do I think that's a good thing? Well, I think what a lot of it has to do is that Trump's biggest successes, especially if you look back on his first term, his biggest successes was that he did not kick anybody away from the negotiating table. And when you're talking about an ongoing war, something that's going on still to this day in the Middle East, and more specifically between the Palestinians and Israelis, and really Israelis and Hamas, which is allegedly Israel's goal, that could be argued. You need to maintain a position at the negotiating table, especially if we are calling ourselves Israel's ally, which, as the United States, we absolutely are. They have not been taken down from that rung. So if that's the case, how could you stop talking to an ally, especially their head of state, the person who's going to deal with you most on foreign policy? This is why I think it's very good that President Trump has resumed, or maybe not necessarily resumed, but never stopped talking to Bibi Netanyahu. Maybe he wanted, you talk about that 4D chess from Trump. I don't necessarily think this was one of those. I think it was probably some misreporting. But that being said, I think that this is a good thing to maintain communication with Bibi Netanyahu, maintain communication with the Israeli government, and try to reach a negotiated settlement for this ongoing conflict, because it has been far, far too long. My apologies, just got a text message there. You're talking about an attack that was waged on Israel going back to October 7th of 2023. We are now in the middle of May 2025. We're going on a year and a half of conflict. Israel has never seen a conflict go on for one singular conflict go on for, I believe it's more than 3 months. So this is so far beyond what Israel is used to dealing with. It's getting into the point now where I truly believe, much like Ukraine, if the United States was not backing Israel and its regime, I do not think that this war will be able to continue. Same way I feel about Ukraine. I do not think that either of these wars will be able to continue without American help. I think it's got to reach an end. I really, really do. News came out about probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, that the lone American, wow, the words are not finding me, the lone American hostage was released out back to Israel. Now, this was pretty interesting to me because it turns out that this American was actually fighting with the IDF. That seems a lot more like a prisoner of war to me than a hostage, but again, you can make your arguments either way here. This is a pretty dirty war. All I'm saying is, I think that it's a good idea that Trump stays in communication with the Israeli government. I do not think it's necessarily a bad thing. However, there is that kind of next level point of why this is good, and that's the fact that we are looking at an end of this conflict, or we're looking for an end of this conflict. I think most of the world is looking for an end of this conflict and some sort of resolution that actually comes to trying to solve the ongoing problem. As I've mentioned many times before in my previous episodes outlining Israel and what their unfortunate past has been, there's been a war with Gaza every 2 to 4 years for the past 20 to 25 years. It's getting to a point where you can arguably make the claim that they're always at war with Gaza. It is not healthy. It is not good for a government to always be at war. It is not good for any state to constantly be asking its allies to pipe up more and more aid in order to keep your wars going. And I think it's reached a point now with Israel that so many people in the United States and around the world are just tired of it, tired of being lobbied, tired of trying to have our minds changed when in reality, most Americans just don't agree with the foundational principles that are leading Israel into war in the first place. Now, is anybody that I know of disregarding the fact that October 7th happened? No, not really. What most people are saying is the way that Israel has gone about this war is criminal in a way. It is going against the human rights of a group of people. And I think some people can plausibly make the claim that they are attempting some sort of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And I think that is a plausible explanation. Do I think that's exactly the truth? Not necessarily. Why do I feel that? Well, part of it really being that you can always make an argument, because it does happen, that there are rockets, shots fired into Israel, if not daily, then weekly, even in non-wartime. And so, in some way, shape, or form, Israel will always have the ability, they may not get the public opinion to do so, but they will always have the ability to argue that they are doing this in defense. Now, when we look at the future, what does it possibly hold with all of this going on? Well, with this week of not so amazing news, you hope that we have a follow-up week this coming week of much better news. We're heading into a holiday weekend, that of Memorial Day, and I'm very much hoping that everybody out there can hope to add into the goodness of the world rather than take away from the goodness or supply some of the negativity. It has been it has been a pretty brutal year for trying to pay attention and follow along to the news, whether you're talking about trying to follow the Trump administration, whether you're trying to follow certain aspects of life that are going all around the world, where you're talking about what happened in Syria, what's been going on continuously with Ukraine and Russia, what's going on with China, what's going on with Israel and Gaza. There are so many issues going on, not to mention what's going on in Africa. There's so many issues constantly going on and constantly cycling through that it's hard to really pay attention. And that's even talking about this week. I didn't even really get to talk about the tax bill that just got put into place, but I think next week we're going to focus a little bit more on that and do a little bit more of a deep dive on that, because there were some interesting points as Andrew and I were talking offset here a little bit about some things that were promised came through, some things that were always talked about did not happen. And again, with this week that's gone through and a lot of unfortunate news drop, and again some update information, I didn't want to just kind of tag this on at the end of the show. We'll talk about that tax bill that went through, or at least allegedly went through the House, I believe. We'll talk about that next week. For all the rest of it, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you guys have a fantastic Memorial Day weekend, as that will be next weekend, this weekend coming up, and I will have a show out probably on Memorial Day. I hope you all stay safe. Hope you all contribute to the goodness in the world, like I said, rather than the negativity. And let us know how we did here. I'm your host, Salvatore Assante. This is the We The Patriots Podcast. I will catch you all.
Wish I were the fucking state. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.